Sure, sir.
Yeah. I thought you are not going to join the class.
No, I saw the mail just now.
Okay.
Yesterday.
Okay, fine. Okay, so let me start the class. So today we're going to talk about the very basic of the docking procedures. Okay. The theories, the principles that are involved in this whole docking process and all. So in the last class we talked about how we can manipulate to make our docking more feasible, more accurate, and the things that we have to, the notions that we have to take care of, the different dimensions and the different structural parameters and all this that we should take care of so that the docking results that we get are more authenticate because it's a simulation process. So obviously we have to bear in mind that it's not it should mimic the normal physiological conditions, otherwise the total procedure is going to collapse because it is not going to fulfill the entire criteria. Okay, so today we're going to start about this the very basic of docking, so the thing that we have missed, and the basic principles and the things that are there. Okay, so see this so now we actually know what is docking, right? We know what is docking, we know how to take care of docking and all. So and we know that through docking we can take care of number of different entities like protein, nucleic acid, ligands and all these things. So you see that we so now currently in this particular scenario, in this the life size of the era that we are living in, the molecular docking has actually become an increasingly important tool for drug discovery, right? And there are the relevant basic theories, including the sampling algorithm and scoring functions. Those are actually discussed in the next few slides. The differences and the performance of the available, there are, that apart from this particular chimera, there are also a number of different servers available for performing of docking. And they all differ from one another in the basic fundamental principle. The fundamental principle is same, but they all differ in the basic algorithm by which they are built upon. Okay, and there are actually different methods by which you can perform the docking and the procedures or the algorithm of docking. For example, we have a flexible receptor molecular docking approach. Now these are especially those that includes the backbone flexibility in receptors. They are actually a challenge for the available docking methods. Now there is a very recently developed local move Monte Carlo based approach. In short, we call it as LMMC, and that is actually introduced as a potential solution to this flexible receptor docking problem. Because as I've told you that if the receptor is highly flexible, then it becomes really difficult for the docking procedure, because for docking you actually have to have the ligand or the receptor a little bit stable, because if it is changing its structure or conformations very fast, then obviously the interactions that is going to have is not going to be tough one. For example, suppose as I've told you that there are few side chains, right? You remember the one with highest side chain flexibility, the amino acid, Abhinandan?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, which amino acid have the highest flexibility?
Proline.
Not
Proline
proline.
is most.
In the last
Not
class we
proline.
discussed it. Side chain
Glycine.
flexibility. The amino acid with highest side chain flexibility.
Glycine.
Yes, ricin and arginine. So what happens is that if you have those highly flexible side chain, it becomes a little bit difficult for the ligand to attach to those two regions, because they are fluctuating a lot, they are hindering a lot, and that actually develops a crack or a break in the conjugation. So suppose the ligand is going to bind to or is going to get conjugated with a particular residue, but if that particular residue hinders a lot, then obviously the bond it is forming. Now that particular bond might be a polar bond, it might be a non-polar bond, whatever it might be, it is going to suffer a lot. So to address that issue, there are a novel technique have been developed that is known as local move Monte Carlo method. That's the LMMC method. Okay. Now, so we'll talk about that also. So how that issues or how that actually tackles that particular issue and all. Now, generally, that the molecular docking was actually started as a small molecular docking, and it is actually also a study of how two or more molecular structure For instance, a drug and a catalyst or a macromolecular receptor, they actually match along to be a perfect fit. Now, the binding orientation of these small molecule drug candidates to their macromolecular target, that actually predicts the affinity and activity of this of a given small molecule. Now, for example, the most simple procedure is actually the protein docking. It's the most simple procedure because it involves the docking of two protein molecules without the any need of experimental measurement. Now, in this kind of docking, generally flexible and rigid docking method is followed, and apart from it, you also have a shape complementary method that also actually that is the most essential ingredient of this scoring function for protein docking. Okay, and the steady rise in the number of protein structures elucidated, that has actually boosted the number of protein docking studies, and apart from it, the intensive research that is being carried out in this field also caters to this particular need. Now, there are actually many proteins that also remain rigid after forming a complex, and that can also be docked to this particular essential residues. Okay. So apart from this protein docking, you also have the protein ligand docking. Now, the general problem in this protein ligand docking is that the ligand is actually not a organic molecule. It's not an organic molecule, right? So the problem is, while you develop a force field that actually caters to this or the force field which is better or is perfected for the organic molecule like protein, nucleic acid and all, in that particular case you also have to add another force field that caters to the inorganic molecule like a ligand, because see, the inorganic force field, it does not consider the proteins and all as a perfect fit for them, whereas the organic force field like FF14SB and all, if you upload a particular ligand in that particular force field, they're going to take that ligand as an outside source and they're going to say that there is no entity like that in their library. So one approach is to update that library. How to update the library? You have to simply go to the basic file status. You have to where all the basic parameters of organic molecules are listed, and there you actually have to upload the basic parameters or the bonding that are present in your ligand. Suppose for a particular case you have a bond, a carbon and a bromine bond, okay, or there is suppose a bond between oxygen and a sulfur molecule, or suppose you have a sodium or a potassium molecule. Now, generally, sodium, potassium, this kind of thing, or the bromine, these are not present in the sulfur is present in protein, but generally bromine, sodium, potassium, these are not a part of our normal organic era, right? So in that particular case, what happens is that you have to make sure that the docking structure or server, they understand what is this bromine, what is the chemical capacity of bromine, because you also have to consider the charge and the electronic configuration of bromine that can also induce certain formation of certain non-polar interactions. So you have to consider that, and for that you have to upload and give in all the informations that are there for the particular bromine. Now this is a bit complicated, so normal people, they fail to do this job. Okay, so what's the other way out? The other way out is to use another force field that caters to this inorganic molecule. Now, do you know any other force field that caters to this particular inorganic molecule? A name of any other force field?
Charm.
Huh?
Charm.
Amber. Charm is not a force field. Yes, amber is force field, but generally in amber you have FF14, FF14SB, FF99SB. These are actually the force field. Okay, and charm is a good thing, but the problem is that in case of in there also you actually have to update your library and state that this is an inorganic molecule and all. So generally what happens is that in case of amber also, the amber caters to the organic molecule. So what about the inorganic molecule? You have to use anti-amber. You have to use anti-chamber. Okay, or that is anti-amber. You have to use that particular thing to stabilize. You have seen, right, while you develop that particular thing in Chimera, there is a small box that opens up and that says that all these calculations are going to be done in anti-amber, right? Why? Because the normal amber fails to perform that particular thing. But the same thing, the problem of protein nucleic acid or the protein, they don't cater to that particular need. Okay. So when you that generally four categories of docking: the protein nucleic acid, okay, protein ligand and nucleic acid ligand. Now among them, the most problematic force is that protein and protein nucleic acid. And why is that? Because if you think it that if you consider protein, there's a lot of different binding point for a particular protein. But in case of nucleic acid, there are only 2 points where the protein generally binds to. One is the major groove, another is the minor groove. These are the two major points where the protein or any ligand that might have the access or binding to this particular nucleic acid. Okay. Now the thing is that when you have this nucleic acid, if you consider, suppose you have DNA, right? And in your DNA, obviously there are a lot of proteins that go and come and bind to a particular nucleic acid or DNA. But how do you think they are binding to your DNA? Because protein have a particular structure, they have a particular conformation which can be identified by other proteins or other ligands. But in case of ligand or in case of nucleic acid, the entire structure is a duplex, right? So how do you think the protein understand that where to bind and where not to bind?
The charge of the molecule.
The DNA is actually negatively charged. Can you say why?
Phosphate group.
Yeah. So it's overall a negative charge. Everywhere you go over the DNA, it's negatively charged.
Yes.
So how do you think the protein?
Shape complementarity.
The protein is a duplex. Everywhere the protein is generally in a duplex format.
Mm, I know that the protein can bind only when there is a shape complementarity.
Yeah, but how? Generally the duplex is everywhere is duplex. If you consider promoter region or a upstream region, it is a duplex.
No idea, sir.
Generally the protein binds according to the sequence complementarity, not the shape. The shape of the duplex DNA might be similar everywhere, but the sequence is not, right? And so the protein generally scans the sequence. So particularly that not all protein binds to nucleic acid, right? There are only a few proteins that binds to nucleic acid, the transcription factors, the DNA damage proteins and all. So they all have one thing that they can do is they can scan the nucleic acid sequence. And while they scan up, if they find the complementary sequence, they cater and they bind to that particular area or that particular domain with high uh, energy, high affinity. But the other thing is that not only that, they also take the help of shape complementarity. But the thing is that they don't cater to duplex DNA. Why? Because in our body there are also various part or higher order nucleic acid structures. You know the DNA is does not it does not on it not only have a duplex structure, but it can also assume higher order structure like DNA quadruplex, G quadruplex, I motif structure, G triplex structure. Okay, so these are higher order structure and they are actually formed in some well-known regions. For example, in the promoter regions or in the 5' UTRs, the point of regulations. Specifically, they are formed in the point of regulations. So these higher order structures are generally unique and they can be easily be distinguished from the rest of the DNA. So there are some proteins that actually rather than binding to this particular duplex DNA, they bind to this higher order structured DNA. Okay. And after binding to that particular DNA, they then perform all the functions upstream from that particular site. Okay, and they actually act as an anchoring site. Okay, so that is also one thing that you have to keep in mind while performing protein nucleic acid structure. You have to see that whether the protein binds to the duplex DNA or is it binding to the some higher order structure, because generally these higher order structure can shuffle between the higher order structured DNA and the duplex DNA. For example, the G quadruplex. The G quadruplex is generally formed in the G-rich region, and they can shuffle between the transcriptionally active DNA duplex, and transcriptionally inactive G quadruplex. Okay, so this shuffling is actually also mediated by two other proteins. And so there are some proteins, some functions like SP1, transcription factor like SP1 and all. Then we all know that SP1 binds to this particular promoter region, but it has been now found that SP1 actually binds to this G quadruplex structure. Okay, they prevent the binding of or the transcription through SP1. So those are potential binding sites. So also keep that in mind while performing protein nucleic acid docking, that whether that particular nucleic acid stays in a duplex format or does it assume a higher order structure. Because if it assumes a higher order structure and you go on performing the docking with the duplex signature, then obviously the result is not going to be similar, and it's going to be a potentially unwanted scenario that you got. Okay, so these are the things that you have to keep in mind while performing, specifically while performing the nucleic acid. Okay, now generally you know that this this completion of this human genome project that has actually resulted in an increasing number of new therapeutic target for drug discovery. And at the same time, the high throughput protein purification, the crystallography, the nuclear magnetic resonance spectroscopy technique, they all have been developed and they have contributed to many structural details of protein and protein ligand complexes. And these advances actually allow the computational strategies to permeate all aspects of the drug discovery that we see today. Now, generally, the thing that we have discussed is that autodock. Okay. Now, see, this autodock is actually a molecular docking suite that consists of automated docking tools. Now, generally, the autodock consists of two main programs. Can you say what are the two main programs? You have used it. Just give me 1 minute. Think of the answer and give me 1 minute. Yes. Say.
Cannot recall, sir.
See, you remember how you perform the docking, right?
Yes.
So what are the things that you have to do? The two main
I
things.
have to check the ligand structure and the protein
Let
structure.
go of the structure preparation. Let go of the structure preparation. So after structure preparation, what do you have to do? See, there are two main programs. One is the autodock, another is the auto grid. Remember, you have to set up a grid, right? You have to set up a grid or the area in which you want to dock your ligand. So this autodock actually docks the two molecules that you get according to the grid. Okay. And this grid is actually pre-calculated and is set up by this auto grid. Okay. So the two main feature is autodock and autogrid, where the autogrid actually set up the docking site where you want your ligand to dock to. Now this autodock is actually considered one of the best program when it comes to docking and virtual screening. And I'm just going to give you a brief overview. Okay, because we have already performed this thing. Typically, we used to discuss this and then later go on to the docking site. But since you have already, you know the docking site, but you have forgotten something, so let me remind you. So this, see what you have to do. So the thing is that the various possible problems must be resolved before a protein can be used for autodock, right? And this includes missing atoms, chain break, alternate locations, missing side chains, right? So all these things need to be corrected, and for that, these are all formed under the ligand preparation or the protein processing platform or in the protein processing tool. A similar thing can also be done for the ligand, that the ligand has to be prepared, the charge has to be maintained and all. And after that, we have to do, and generally, you know that after that, we have to use a potential energy grid that can be used by different docking program. Now, these grids represent the energy calculations, and in their most basic form, the grid stashes two type of potentials. One is the electrostatic and another is the van der Waals force. Now, this particular grid that was there, it was actually formulated so that the information about the receptor's energy contribution could be stored on grid point. And that actually allows the necessity of it being read only during the ligand scoring. Now, there are more options that can actually be explored in this autodoc, and the options may vary depending upon the complexes that are being docked and also on the complexity of the problem at hand. Okay. The thing is that the most important issue that the docking program keeps in mind is the electrostatic interaction and the van der Waals forces, because these are the most common type of interaction that are going on through your molecule. But the other thing that you have in your hand is that the polar interactions. Now, polar interactions are generally very specific. Okay, whereas the electrostatic and the van der Waals force interactions are catered to a wider range of audience. For example, the polar interaction, if you simply talk about hydrogen bond, then the hydrogen bond can actually be formed by only three atoms: the nitrogen, oxygen, and the fluorine, right? So apart from, if you don't have this kind of interactions, or if you don't have these atoms very nearby one another, then hydrogen bond can't be formed. But that doesn't mean that if you don't have a polar interactions or a hydrogen bond, that doesn't mean that the ligand is not binding to your point, or the two proteins are not interacting with one another. No, that's not the case. The case is that two proteins bind to one another, but not with polar, but more with the electrostatic or the non-polar interactions, because you see the hydrogen bond generally have a cutoff range. Apart from 4 angstrom, generally the hydrogen bond doesn't form. But electrostatic interactions and random interactions, they don't have a cutoff. You may go as long as you want, as far as you want, but there still would be a very small amount of electrostatic interaction between the two molecules. But yes, that might be too small, that might be too low to be calculated, and generally that's why we use a particular cutoff of 8 angstrom, because otherwise the calculations becomes too complex, and the more complex the calculation becomes, the more time it is going to take. And the thing why we use docking as a tool or the platform is they have a very quick resolving power, and that's why we generally use this kind of thing. Okay. So generally, these are the things that you already, I think, you know that what is a receptor, what's a host, what's a ligand, what's docking, what's the binding mode, and all that binding poses. These are the things that we have already discussed, and you already know. Okay, so I'm not going to repeat these again because you have already gone through that. So now there are actually different theories that are there for docking. Now, when I talk about theory, what do I mean? Theory means, as I've told you, different docking program, they use different algorithm. Now the different algorithm that they have been devised as they were defined by the theory. Now the most basic theory for docking is that lock and key theory. Do you know what is lock and key theory?
Yes,
Okay, so just state.
they are just based on shape complementarity, it will fit into the log, the active site.
Yes, so that means that the target site is fixed. You have a ligand, and simply they are binding to one another as a lock, and as a key fits into only a single lock. That's how they bind. A single ligand binds to a single target. You know that knowing the location of the binding site before docking process, it significantly increases the docking efficiency. Now, in many cases, the binding site is indeed known before docking ligands into it. Okay, and also one can obtain information about the sites by comparison of the target protein with a family of proteins which share similar function, or with proteins co-crystallized with other ligands and all. Now, in that particular case, what we have, suppose we have a ligand, we have a particular protein where the protein docks to a ligand, crystal structure is available. So when I have a protein ligand crystal structure available, I can simply download that particular structure, and I know where the ligand is binding. So I know this is a ligand binding site, and it's done. So I know the ligand binding site. I'm going to devise a receptor ligand, and I am to allow the ligand to bind to that exact location and all. But in the absence of knowledge about the binding site, then you have to use the cavity detection programs. Okay. For example, there are various programs or various tools that are there for, like Grid, Pocket, SurfNet, FAST, MMC. They all can actually be utilized to identify the putative active site within the proteins. And the docking without any assumption about the binding site is called what? What docking?
Blind docking.
Blind docking, exactly. Now, in this particular blind docking, but there's one problem with blind docking. The various program, when they assume, or where they try to assume the ligand pockets, they generally they don't give a single pocket. They say that these sites are the ligand binding site. It might be 2, 3, 4, 5, or 6, 7, 8 sites. Now among them, one or two sites you might feel that these are excellent point and the ligand is sure to bind to this point and all, but sometimes that doesn't happen. Sometimes these tools, they make a mistake, and rather than finding an accurate ligand binding site, they try to deduce and find some other binding site. And that's where the main problem begins, because when you are starting a docking, you're using a pocket which is not a ligand binding site. So obviously all the information that you deduce after docking is not going to be an accurate information. And so if you want to cross check it using the wet lab experimental molecular biology techniques, you are going to find that it is not using. Now, can you say what kind of experiment would you do to accurately interpret your docking result? Suppose you have done a docking. How are you going to prove that yes, your ligand is bind to that particular point using molecular biological experiments? What kind of experiments are you going to do?
Electrophoresis.
What?
Electrophoresis.
Electrophoresis. Electrophoresis, it is not going to show that whether it is binding to that exact location or not. Do you get my point? Suppose your western blotting is going to show that if there is any change to the protein concentration or not. It's not going to show whether your ligand is binding to your protein. You might see the consequence, but what I'm asking is that how are you going to be sure that your ligand is binding to that exact same region in the protein? You might see that yes, ligand is binding to the protein, but how are you going to be sure that your ligand is binding to that exact region of protein or to the exact residues? Think of it. I'm going to ask the answer again. Acha, do you have the time to do 2 classes today?
2 classes not possible to this.
Okay, okay, done. So you see that one thing that you have is that so what I was talking about. Okay, so this theory. So yes, see in this particular, so you see that obviously if you don't have any known faces or known answer, then obviously it's going to be a falsified location. Okay, now one can think of the molecular docking as a problem of lock and key, in which one wants to find the correct relative orientation of the key, which will simply open up the lock, right? Now generally these are the docking sites are actually present on the surface of the lock, right? And in this case, generally the proteins can be thought of as the lock and ligand can be thought of as the key. And molecular docking may be defined as an optimization problem, which should describe the best fit orientation of a ligand that binds to a particular protein of interest. But since the major fault in this particular thing is that both ligand and the protein are flexible. The ligand and protein are not hard bound thing. They are flexible molecules, so they don't have a particular structure throughout their lifetime, right? So the more better analogy would be hand in glove analogy. Okay, so what is hand in glove? Hand in glove means simply you are putting your hand inside a glove. So you have used the gloves, right, in your laboratory.
Yes.
So you see that generally they come in different shapes, but what happens is that the gloves you put up in, it assumes the shape of your hand, right? So that is the induced fit theory. That is the induced fit theory. And during the course of this docking process, the ligand and the protein, they adjust their conformation to achieve an overall best fit. And this kind of conformational adjustment resulting in the overall binding is referred to as induced fit theory. Okay. Now, generally, the molecular docking research, it actually focuses on computationally simulating the molecular recognition process, and it aims to achieve an optimized conformation for both the protein and ligand and the relative orientation between the protein and ligand, such that the free energy of the overall system is minimized. Because if the ligand and protein are binding, but if they have a very high energy, then obviously it's not going to be a stable complex. It has to be energetically minimized structure, because if it is not energetically minimized structure, then obviously they are not going to have any proper simulation. They are going to break up because they have a huge amount of energy between them. So obviously always think that whenever you are going for induced fit theory and all, always try to make sure that they are having an energetically minimum theory. And so for that, what you have to do, you have to, if you have no idea where they are in a energetically minimum conformation or not, then what you have to do, you have to minimize them. Now for minimization, you can use charm, or you can use amber, whatever program you have. You can use the chimera. There's also a program in chimera in which you can use the, they use that amber program that for minimization and all. Okay, so the other method that you have is that the geometry matching. And as you see that in this particular case, what's happened, that they generally describe the protein and ligand as a set of features that make them dockable. Okay, now these features include the molecular surface, the complementary surface descriptors and all. And in this case, the receptor's molecular surface is actually described in terms of solvent accessible surface area. Okay, and what is solvent accessible surface area?
That area of the protein that interacts with the solvent.
Yes, the area of the protein that interacts with solvent. But why is it important?
It is important, but because those areas are important for ligand binding.
Yes, because a ligand is only going to bind to the polar areas, only the areas that are touching with water. The other domains which are buried deep inside the proteins, those are not accessible by the ligand, right? So they are not going to be, so that particular area, that particular domain is not available for the ligand to bind to. Only the solvent accessible surface area is available for the ligand to bind to. So in this particular method, what happens? The complementarity is there, but the complementarity moves with the surface molecules, the surface amino acids that are present there. This complementarity between these two surfaces, it actually amounts to the shape matching description that help finding the complementary pose of docking the target and the ligand molecule. Okay, and apart from it, there's also another approach, and that is to describe the hydrophobic feature of the protein using using turns in the main chain atoms. And apart from it, there is also another technique that you have, that is the Fourier shape descriptor technique. Okay, now this shape complementary method, how it is different from the induced fit method?
Induced fit induces change in the conformation,
Yeah.
but shape complementary does not induce any change.
Yes, because here they cannot model the movement or the dynamic change that you find in the ligand. Okay, they cannot model that particular thing, and so obviously, but there are recent development that actually allow this method to investigate the ligand flexibility. But the thing is that the ligand flexibility has to also be taken into account, because the ligand might assume different poses, and all the different pose that a ligand might have, that also caters to the ligand binding. Because you see the proteins, now the entire domain of protein doesn't change. There are only a few factors or a few area where the protein changes the structure, but typically there are also few areas where the protein doesn't change the structure, where So if a ligand is going to bind to that area where the protein is not changing the structure, so there the pose of the ligand is only the thing that you have to maintain the flexibility of their binding. So you also have to take the application or the approach of this ligand poses. Okay. But the thing is that why this shape complementarity method is used, because it can quickly scan through the entire through several thousand ligand in a matter of second, and can actually figure out whether they can bind at a protein active site or not, and if they are usually scalable to even protein protein interaction. Now these are actually much more amenable to the pharmacophore based approaches, because they use the geometric descriptors like the SASA, the point, the electrostatics information, and all this to find the optimal binding. Okay. So that is why generally in case of virtual screening and all, shape complementary method is generally used, because in that particular case you don't have a single ligand. For a particular docking you have a single ligand, but for virtual screening you might have 100 or 200 ligands, and that's when the problem kicks in, because if you have 200 ligands, then obviously it becomes a little bit, it's going to take a lot of time to finish up and see whether it is binding to that particular thing or not. And so for that, generally the shape complementarity method is preferred. Okay. So apart from that, there is also another thing, that is the simulation. So what is the simulation? Now you see that simulation, you know what is simulation, and see that simulating this docking process is much more complicated. Okay. Because why? Because binding of a ligand to this unique protein site is not very simple. It is not easy as the ligand is coming and simply binding to it. No, it's not that simple. You have to understand everything. You have to see that that the protein is obviously going to come and bind to that active site, but obviously for binding it is going to have certain number of move in its conformational space. It is going to change the structure, it's going to change its shape, it's going to turn, it's going to flip, and you have to calculate all this flipping. You have to calculate and you have to incorporate this flipping into your considerations. Okay. And because this flipping, they include two type of rotations or two type of movement. What? One is the translational movement, another is the rotational movement. So obviously calculating and so not calculating, pre-calculating all these moves, and then seeing the distance between this ligand and the that particular active site, they all take a toll. Why? Because if the ligand is not near to the ligand, if the ligand is not near to the protein, still it is going to come to that particular unique site because of its electrostatics. So you have to calculate the electrostatic of each of its movement. When the ligand is at x1, y1, z1, you have to calculate that electrostatic. When the ligand is at x2, y2, z2, you have to calculate the electrostatics, and not only with a single atom, but for all atom of the ligand and for all atom of the protein, you have to calculate it. And then you have to see if there is any change or not. So obviously, it's going to take a lot of time. But the thing is that it is going to be highly efficient as well. This will be highly efficient. Okay. So see, each of these move in the conformational space of ligand, it actually induces a total energetic cost of the system. And that is why this total energy is actually calculated after every move. Now you see, now can you state the pros of this particular approach? Why do you think this particular thing is so what do you think among shape complementarity and simulation, which is better?
Simulation.
Simulation. Why?
Because simulation gives us atomistic details.
Yes. And not only that, it also incorporates the ligand flexibility, right? It also
Yes.
incorporates the ligand flexibility, and that is where the model reality, it actually mimics or accurately mimics the reality. Why? Right? Whereas in case of this particular shape complementarity, it is obviously a more an abstract idea where you are not taking into account that particular of the structure, the flexibility of the ligand. Okay, but obviously you see that clearly simulation is computationally expensive because they have to explore a large energy landscape. Okay, and for this there are various other methods that have been developed or that you have to take into account. For example, the grid based technique, the optimization method, and obviously the increased computer speed that have actually made the docking simulation more realistic. But obviously if you don't have this kind of you don't have a system to run the simulation, it's going to take a lot of time. It's going to take a lot of time because when you talk about atom, there are generally few thousands of atoms in a particular docking scenario. In any particular docking scenario, there are few thousands atoms at least. So obviously, it's going to take a lot of toll on your computational power. So you have to keep that in mind, so that that particular computational toll is not hampered, is not reduced. Okay, because if you do it in this particular laptop, the laptop that I am using is going to get hanged. So for that you need a dedicated system. But the thing is that obviously right now, generally the more recent algorithms that are coming, the more recent algorithms that are being generated, they all have this particular method, this particular not method, the particular codes, the code that are much easily conveys all this data. Because you see that the major difference between the shape complementary simulation and all this technique is how you write the algorithm, how you write the code. And generally you know that these codes are not written by a biologist but a physicist. But the major problem is that the physicists, they don't understand the biological system. That's the major problem. The physicists, they don't understand the biological problems. They don't understand the biology. Whereas the biologists, they don't understand the physics. They don't understand the codings. So obviously they two have to go hand in hand. One has to take the help from another. So that's why even in all these things, there are certain things that are lacking. You're obviously, when you go to the simulation or you go to the shape complementary or go to any of the method, you're obviously going to find that yes, there are certain lacunas there. Why? Because those lacunas are there because that has not developed by a particular biologist. Or even if you think in case of biologist, the biologist doesn't understand the physics in a more atomistic detailing, right? And that is why whenever you go through every simulation or docking platform, you have to consider this energy landscapes. You have to consider the energetical contributions to each of these things, because a minor energy fluctuations might be sufficient to destroy a particular binding. Now that particular binding, suppose you might see sometimes that yes, you are using a particular program and you see that the ligand is binding to that particular protein. It's binding to the particular protein, and you see that yes, even after simulation, keeps on bonded to the particular protein. But in reality, you might find that yes, it is not binding to that particular protein. Now, why is it happening? There are two methods, or there are actually two reasons for that. One reason is that your ligand pocket might be different. The pocket that you have used for simulation might be different than where the ligand is originally binding to. And the second one is that, was the second reason?
Protein active site maybe
Not active site. Sometimes what happens is that there are certain cofactors and all that are associated with a particular protein. Okay, there are certain enzymes, not enzymes, cofactors. There are certain ions that are bonded to a particular protein. But sometimes those ions are not. If you are downloading a crystal structure, or if you don't know whether the particular atom is there, so you might see that there is a different conformational fluctuation in that particular atom binding zone. So if you don't consider or place an atom there, then that particular interaction or that particular ligand binding site is not going to be there. For example, there are certain proteins like CAPF protein. CAPF is one of the protein that has two zinc ions embedded into them. So if you simply remove the zinc ions, we could easily see that yes, the structural region is changing. The entire structure is changing. The ligand binding domain and the substrate binding. There are two domains. One is the ligand binding domain. Another you have another protein binding domain, the NADPH binding domain. So that particular domain structure is changing hugely just because of an absence of a zinc ion. So you see that even a zinc ion is actually can neglect and it can destroy the protein structure. So obviously when I'm using the NADPH with a zinc-free system, it is not going to bind to that particular domain. Why? Because the binding structure has been modified. So these are things that you have to keep in mind. And now can you think of that particular idea or particular answer, how you can model that unique thing, or how do you know that your ligand, so from this particular thing you know that your ligand is binding to this residue arginine lysine and it's binding to that particular domain of protein. So how do you validate it from the molecular biological experiments? Think a little bit, is really easy answer.
No, sir. Tell me.
Through SDM.
What, sir? Yes.
SDM, site directed mutagenesis.
Oh, okay.
That means what? We have to simply take a particular clone of the protein and we have to make some important mutations. Suppose you see that your ligand is binding to the arginine domain. Now, obviously, if it's binding to the arginine, what you have to do, you have to take the clone of protein and you have to simply mutate the arginine residue with a alanine or with some other residue. Generally, we mutate with alanine. Okay. So you simply mutate it to alanine and then you use and you get the particular protein. And now you see whether your ligand is binding to the protein or not. Now, if you see that after you mutate the 2 or 3 most important binding region with that particular alanine, then you see that your ligand is not binding with that particular protein. And when you see that ligand is not binding, it actually proves that your ligand binds to that exact 3 residue, because that is the 3 point where you have made mutations, right?
Yes.
Okay, so by doing this, simply what you have to do, you have to take that modified protein and you have to perform ITC, or you might perform the fluorescence anisotropy or other experiment that you have, or UV spectroscopy through which you can get the KD. Now, obviously, if you are sure, if you see that yes, by mutating those residues, the ligand is not binding, or there is no, the KD has been dropped hugely, you know that those are the unique, that is the correct binding region. But even after mutation, if you see that yes, the ligand is still binding to the protein with high affinity, then you know for sure that your ligand binding site is a little bit different than the one you have received from the docked structure. So for that, you again have to redo the docking and get the result, and ultimately which caters to your, which obviously make sure that your mol bio experiment and the simulation experiment goes hand in hand, that yes, those two are actually uh, doing okay. You get the idea?
Yes.
So in your experiment, are you performing any mol bio experiment, or you are simply going through the computational biology?
No, only the computational part.
Only computational biology. Okay, okay. Generally, but so you are doing this, and after that, are you using any NMR spectroscopy or other thing to make sure that
No, I'm doing the only simulation.
you are doing only the simulation part?
Yes.
Okay, okay, okay. I get that. Apart from it, if you don't want to use the mol bio, then you can obviously use the NMR spectroscopy and other to convey confirmation. But obviously, for NMR spectroscopy, that's also a little bit difficult. If you don't know how to do that, it will take a lot of time.
Okay.
But obviously, it's very good idea to do some experiment at least to make sure that your docking results are okay, because the docking result is actually a theoretical result, right? So it's
Yes.
obviously needed that you back up with that data with some other experiments. Okay.
Yes.
Okay, fine. Okay. Oh, since you don't have the time for second class today, so we are stopping here, and the next class will go in detail about that particular thing. Okay.
Okay. Okay.
Okay. Okay. Sure. So tomorrow we're going to have the class.
Yes.
Okay. I'm going to send you the link and the schedule.
Okay.
Okay. Sure. Thank you.
Okay.